All right. So welcome, folks. I had this idea in my last my Zoom meeting, and I just kind of had this open format where if anyone had questions or anything, you were free to ask me anything you want about the film industry. And it came up in conversation last time about Darin, do you remember Kit on T11 Incomplete? She was helping with wardrobe. I don't know if you remember her, but she brought up, she's like, oh my God, can we please talk about this bad set? And I was like, I'm not going to talk about bad sets right now because it gives me like PTSD thinking about that feature film. So that's where the idea came from, talking about film set horror stories. And I've been in the industry for a few years. He has a lot of experience. He is let me introduce you guys to Darin. He is a DP. I know him as a DP. As a first AD, I work with him mostly as a DP. And he's also a director. He's an artist. He's a musician. He's like, does everything. He's like anything creative he does, which is awesome. So he's really, really great to tap into. And he's really great at storytelling. So that's why I was like, he is the perfect person to have on this.
The pressure is on.
No, it's so great.
No. Oh my God. Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to talk about the film set horror stories only because I feel like it's going to happen to everybody who's like trying to be in film or trying to move up or just being on set in general. Just things happen and you can have the best prep possible. And there's always something that goes wrong no matter what. Like unforeseen things, maybe you didn't think about certain things and things just go awry. Or sometimes you don't even see the red flag. So I'm just going to start there. And I'll start with talking about one of my short films. And it was when I was a very, very young AD. And it was a 6-day short film. And I remember it was a woman director, woman producer, meetings went well. We were really great in prep. And then we get on set and first 2 days we're in a theater because it was about an older gentleman who had dementia. And then what we did is we created this nighttime, like Tonight Show-esque type feel. And when he goes into one of his, delusions or whatever, when he goes in and out of it, reality, this is where he goes when he has one of these episodes. So he goes to his like live talk show. And the first 2 days were great. Everything, I wrapped early. I was like, yes, I'm an awesome AD, woo, woo, woo. And then we get to the third day and we're shooting in a diner. And everything's fine. We're unloading and producers are talking to the owner. And then I'm like, okay, when can we start moving stuff in? I'm like, we're ready to go. I knew we had a lot of scenes that day. And I knew that it was going to be a tough day, but did not know that it was going to be one of the worst days of my AD career. I swear to God. And this was like, Amber was crying at the end of this. I was like, oh my God. It was like the one of the first days that I realized I was like, wow, this is not easy being an AD. So what happened was the owner of the diner that we were shooting in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And apparently the director knew the owner and they are close friends with her father and everything. And everything is like happy-go-lucky. Things are great. But he's like, you guys can't shoot here during this time and you have to wait until when there is no dinner rush or lunch rush. And I'm like, wait, how are we going to make this day? Like, how is this possible? So the first thing I asked the producer and the director, and I was like, is there a contract? Like, did you sign a contract with the locations people? Like, did you talk to this guy and say, hey, these are the hours we need, buy out his diner basically? And they didn't have anything on paper. So he just like threw us out basically. Wow. And we were like in the parking lot and it was like, people are like, Amber, what is going on? See, the first thing as an AD, if anyone's trying to be an AD, is that the crew comes to you first because they're not trying to go to producers first. You're the face. So they're going to you first. And I remember the first they see the, camera, she was like, I don't know what's happening here, but you need to figure it out. And I was like, she was from a union like background. So she was like really hard on me. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, this is not my fault that the producers didn't sign a contract with the diner people. So then somehow the producer was like, okay, we're allowed to film in there. We took care of it. So we go in there and then they're starting to take customers. This is at like 8 a.m. or something by this time. And then we're like, well, what section can we shoot in? And they gave us half the diner. And then they were like, okay, well, you can't do in the other half. And I was like, okay, fine. This is a compromise. We'll have half the diner. So then lunch approaches and he throws us out again.
Oh no.
Again, he was like, I can't have this. My customers come first. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. I was like, this is like Twilight Zone territory. It was like a constant in and out, and had to keep switching around the schedule of the day, figuring out what we could shoot in isolated areas in the diner. It was such a rough day. And then I had like, because the schedule was so flip-flopped around, the actors were getting really, really annoyed too. And that's like the worst for me as an AD. And then one of the actors, he got completely frustrated because he was supposed to have his scenes at the top of the day. And I had to keep pushing them because he was in all the scenes that were, oh, hold on, Kit's coming in, that were like in the group setting. So I was trying to get, hey Kit, I was trying to get all of the scenes that were like single actors out of the way. And he was in all the scenes that required the whole group. It was the entire cast on that day. I had like 9 actors to worry about. It was horrific. And then he gets to me and he's like, Amber, I don't know who you think you are or what's going on. And he yelled in my face, like screamed. It wasn't anything lower than a scream. He was like, I need to know what's going on. And he wasn't even a principal actor. He wasn't even like top 5 actors. Like if it was number 1, I'd be like, okay, I'd take it. But he was only on for a couple of days. And I was like, oh my goodness. And all I could do is I just real calmly, I was like, I'm so sorry. I know you're completely frustrated, but this is a situation that we're trying to deal with. And all I can say is I'm sorry. And he continued to yell at me. He continued to keep yelling at me. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to tell you besides we're going to get to your scenes as soon as we can. And I just walked away. And I was like, I don't know what else to do. What else do you do when someone's yelling in your face, you know? And by the end of that day, it was, I mean, obviously it was more than a 12-hour day. We eventually got like bits and pieces to get the scene together. And it was super stressful. It was like the worst day. I remember on my lunch break, I like walked away and in like the smallest corner called my fiance at the time, my husband. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. This is the worst day ever. I was on the phone for the entire lunchtime and I was like, I don't know how to make this better. And all I needed to do is just like, get away from set, vent to someone so I didn't break down in front of the whole crew, because that's something you just do not want. You have to keep your cool as much as possible. I'm not having anyone say, oh my God, Amber totally broke down in front of everybody. There's like 30 people on set. And, you know, at the end of that day, I had to get a call sheet out. So, because I was like the only, I would say functioning AD, because my second AD wasn't experienced, so she didn't know how to make a call sheet. So after that day, I had to go back and make a call sheet for like another 2 hours after we wrapped. I got out of there, did the call sheet. Come to find out, because of the stressful day, this is what the producers do. While everyone's packing up the trucks, everyone's loading out, the producers, well, I forget her name, Elizabeth, I think her name was, she hands out $100 bills to all the crew members. I found out about this like years and years after, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm the first AD. I went under the most stress and I did not get an extra handout. What the hell is this? I was so upset. Oh my God. And then I remember like, because one of the PAs, Will, he told me, he goes, you didn't get $100? And I was like, no, I didn't get $100. I went to do a call sheet and I never got paid an extra $100. I was so upset. But the producer, she was trying to solve everything by just throwing money at the issue as much as possible, just to keep the owners happy and the crew happy. But from then on, it was like, it was okay. That was the worst day ever. So like after that, I was like, well, it can't be worse than that. And about, I forget how many years later, the actor that screamed in my face, he friends me on Facebook. And he had this like deep, heartfelt apology for me like 3 years later. And I was like, because he said, Amber, do you remember me? And I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely remember this guy. I was like, yes, I remember you. And he's like, I feel so bad that I did that to you in front of everybody. And I was like, you should feel bad. You definitely should feel bad, because that was a shit thing to do. And he was like, what can I do? I was like, there's nothing you can do now, but I accept your apology and I want you to never do that to anybody else ever. like on set or anybody, because no one deserves that. And like this guy was like this huge, like 6'2", like 250-pound guy, and he's like yelling at like a 5'4", like new AD, and I just couldn't believe that. But the fact that he tries to like kiss my ass all the time, every time he sees me on Facebook, is hilarious.
Jeez.
That's my like my first horrible like experience as an AD.
The handing out of the $100 bill thing is just, that's next level.
I know. I'm like, I missed out on free money. I'm like, what the hell? Not even in my weekly paycheck or anything. It was horrible. What were you saying, Kit?
I walked in the middle of the conversation. I missed what set
Bro,
it
you're
was.
just gonna have to wait for the recorded version.
Okay.
I can't go through the whole thing again. It was horrible.
No. That's funny.
So, Darin, what is like one story for you that comes?
Hi, Darin, by the way.
Hi, Kit. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Kit, Amber, and I go way back. This was the we bonded in the war zone together.
Oh man.
Oh.
Like,
I just got a little bit of PTSD.
Yeah,
No,
I know.
really,
It's like
really,
it sends
really.
you into the chills.
Anytime anyone brings up that movie, and for anyone that, it's like, I feel like we're leaving the crowd out, but basically we all worked on a feature film, I think 2 years ago now. I think
it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember because that was like one of the last gigs that I did before I moved out to LA. So
yeah. And I think, Kit, you were only on for a week, right? You were only on for...
Yeah.
So me and Darin were in for the whole thing. So Kit got lucky with only 1 week. So that, I mean, you got lucky with just...
That week spoke volumes, okay?
Yeah.
Mad volume.
Yeah. It was an interesting thing. I mean, first, like, before we get into it, I'm curious to hear from other folks, like, what kind of production backgrounds are you guys coming from? Because and also kind of what you're curious about, because as I get into talking about this movie, it might be interesting to know, like, who we're talking to.
Sure. For me, I'm actually brand new. I don't have any film experience. Also, I'm based in the UK. But my whole approach to like the industry is just to research everything and just to know what is it that I'm getting into it. Mainly because, like other people, you know, they have these expectations, like you work with all these famous people and you travel to all these film sets and it's all great, but I can see the reality of it. So I just want to listen to you guys.
Great.
Yeah, this is really going to throw you into the fire. Then you're going to get the not so glamorous. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, so I actually just graduated with like a media degree. So when I was in school, we did like extremely low budget student film productions. So like $0, you're shooting with your friends, you're using the school's camera kind of things. So I'm kind of curious to learn a lot about the background when it comes to producing a short film or a feature film in the long run, because we weren't really kind of given a crash course in how to come up with contracts for locations or anything like that. We didn't get an introduction into what unions are or anything. So I just kind of like got a seed of inspiration while I was in school. And so now I'm trying to do a little bit more research to understand what it actually takes to make something.
So kind of not just the logistics, but I guess you could say the paperwork, kind of the infrastructure.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. And are you interested in, and also a question for Gio, is there a particular aspect of production that you're most interested in? Do you have a role that you want to play, or are you still kind of figuring that part out?
Yeah, so based on the research I've done on the different roles of a film set, I think I would like to either specialize in camera and then move up to AC, whatever, or sound, maybe, Foley work.
Like post-production?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great.
Foley work, I hear, is really, really fun. It's really interesting what they do to get the sounds. So Foley, I think that's good.
Yeah, just using random stuff to make sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go into the laboratory and have a lot of fun. Amber, what about you? Any particular role you're interested in?
I I kind of said for a while that I liked the idea of being a producer, but not actually having been on a production that was big enough to really understand what that means is. I think that I'm more interested in like the pre-production, but at the same time, I also do like the idea of being on set and being able to like figure out logistics as things are either falling apart or coming together when you're actually shooting. So I'm not exactly sure what position that is. I know that I've heard the AD term thrown around, and there's sometimes when I'm listening to those kind of descriptions that sounds like really interesting and really engaging.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's the route I'm going in, but I'm just kind of like trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah. Well, this is great. It's good to hear from you guys and just to kind of get a sense of like what you're interested in is helpful. I mean, for me, as Amber said, we met as she as an AD and me as a DP, and I found my freelance career is very thankfully pretty varied. I started as a musician, as a film composer back in California, and that's how I gradually. Well, how I really started was I had friends in college that were movie makers, and I had two things to offer them at the time: is I could draw, so I did storyboards, and then I could do music, so I was writing music for them, and they were making these tiny little movies, kind of like what you're describing, Amber. And back in those days, nobody could use their phones, but basically the same way of producing. It was mini DV, it was very low budget, but it was fun, and that's the thing that I always latched onto is there's a few things in life that are more fun than making something with people on a film set. It's just one of those, and I feel like anybody that does this line of work for a while, if you're not having fun, it just doesn't make any sense, because otherwise it's just kind of stupid to do something that's could be so stressful and involves so much logistics. You have to go with what you enjoy. And Gio, you kind of talked about either working on a set or working in Foley. I feel like I've kind of straddled post and production worlds throughout my career. And what's kept me going with all these various things is just I follow what's interesting to me. And thankfully, I've been able to parlay that into doing it for a living, which is very, lucky, but is also something that you can only really do in film. There are few industries that involve a cross section of so many different disciplines. Whether you're an actor, you're a writer, you're purely a technician, you're a computer programmer, you're a producer, like a tremendous variety of skills come together to make films. So there's really something for anyone. And that's why I feel it's one of the great joys, because whatever you bring to the table, you can deliver that at a high level in film and really feel like you've put in a day's work. And that's you can't really say that for every profession. So it's a really unique industry for that reason. But going back to kind of how I got started, I immediately fell in love with film through my friends in college. Graduated from just writing music to eventually making my own films. I had always also been a writer. And it really was an eye-opening moment for me, realizing that there's this thing called film where all these parts of myself that I had thought of as being separate and weird could have a home in film. I didn't just have to be a writer, didn't just have to be a musician. Everything could come together. And for me, that was filmmaking, and it always has been my kind of vision of it. Even as I've met people that are hyper specialized, that have only ever done one thing, you can find a common language with those people. And that's why I always encourage people to try to sample as much as you can, especially as a PA. It's a pretty privileged position, and a lot of people sometimes don't think of it that way. But as a PA, you have such mobility. You could be a camera PA. You could be an art department PA. You could be Amber's PA and learn from her. You could be a PA in all these different departments. And that is such a lucky thing, because as you progress in your career, it's harder to just like float around like that. And if you can do that for a while, as I did for probably about a year and a half, I was like floating around doing PA work in New York. I got a chance to work in the wardrobe department, work in the props department, work in the camera department. I was a DIT. I assisted in a production office. I was an editing assistant. I mean, do all that you can, and accumulate all that experience, so you can be the person that has that bird's eye view.
Mhm.
As you progress in your career, you realize that can be your most valuable asset. It's the person that can look from the top down and understand what everybody needs to do that makes you a good producer, certainly makes you a good AD. But no matter what you choose to specialize in, if you can talk the language, people will respect you more and you'll be able to communicate faster. There's so many examples of directors in particular that don't understand cameras, so they will use the wrong terminology or they'll struggle to communicate what it is they want. But that's just to say, really take advantage of that early time, because it's a very privileged position to be in where nobody's pinholed you as one thing yet. You can just do whatever you want, within the limits of what's available.
Mhm.
But try to float around as much as you can. And that's what I did when I got to New York. I floated around as much as I could. I knew I wanted to make films, but I didn't know where that would end me up. Meanwhile, I was continuing to just make my own stuff, shooting it, writing the music for it, all that stuff. Led me into sketch comedy. I had a sketch comedy group for a year where I was doing all that stuff. I was the only production person. It was myself and two other actors, who were the main writers also. So they would perform in front of the camera and I would do everything behind the scenes. And it wasn't until later that people clued me into the fact that that's a lot of work. But for me, I enjoyed it so much, and again, going back to do what you love. If you enjoy stuff, even if other people call it unreasonable or go like, that's not how everybody else does it, who cares? It just follow what you enjoy. And it might end up being this weird thing that you could call your own, and doesn't necessarily fit within a template. And that's very much been my story. So that catches me up to how Amber and I met. I love being a DP. It's one of those things that I consider being a DP to be the funnest job on a set because you're kept in a happy bubble.
That's so true. We can't piss off the DP. If he's not
Yeah.
happy, no one's
No, totally. And also you don't want to take your DP off of, as a DP, you have one job. You have one job. And you're there to do that job. And it's a job that's really fun. You have to look at stuff and take pictures of it. And, I'm obviously simplifying the job, but it's so much fun. It's just so much fun. And it's so freeing because you don't have to worry about the things that you have to worry about if you're a director, let's say. Because as a director, you're sweating over things like, will I be able to get these shots that I shot listed? Will the producer be happy with this? Am I spending too much money? Is this location going to be okay? As a DP, yeah, you can be aware of that stuff, but nobody wants you to take your eye off the one job that you have, which is to shoot the shots. As my wife says when I come home from set, did you shoot the shots today? And I'm like, yeah, I shot the shots. And Amber could tell you, like, as an AD, your job is constantly being blown up by whatever happens to be the emergency of the moment.
Yeah.
And as a DP, you're insulated from that. And in some ways, your AD insulates you from that. It's totally a very privileged position to be in as a DP. It's not the only thing that I do, but when I do it, I love doing it. It's very, you can focus on that one job. So Amber and I met on a short film called Mutiny that my very good friend Stephanie was producing, and Stephanie and I go way back. And so she called me in as a DP for that project. And it was one of the funnest sets I've ever been on. And going back to film being fun, I mean, the greatest joy of working in film is the friends that you make and the people that you get to know, like, really closely in a very short amount of time, because you're spending so much time together. You see each other stressed out. You see each other like happy. You get a sense of what makes somebody
worst and then like their best.
Yeah, totally.
So
all of the above. And that was such a fun set because we all got along so much.
Yes. Yeah,
Amber and I instantly shared like a raunchy sense of humor and and a love for coffee.
Yeah, God.
Yeah.
I was the one making the coffee for like the two of them. So
Poor Kit. Kept
There
us
was
happy.
one time where like Darin asked me to put on the pot of coffee. I'm like, it's already going.
I was like,
It's
Kit's on
already
top.
Yep. Already taken care of. Yeah. So, I mean, Kit or Amber, do you have any memories of that set that you want to share? Because it was a fun shoot.
I really, yeah. Oh, sorry, Kit, go ahead. We've talked so much. Kit, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was gonna say it just so happened to be like my first official set as being a PA, like on a full term basis, that kind of thing. Because the first time I did it, it was just more of like Amber getting to like gauge my reactions and that kind of stuff. So like Mutiny was the first one that I actually got to be on, and I was really lucky because I have heard about the horror stories about, oh my gosh, my first PA set was so fucking horror, blah blah blah, and I'm like, it was pretty chill. Like
I had a good time.
yeah, like I was just like, if this is, I'm like, but obviously I was kind of like, the shoe is gonna drop somewhere, but I'm glad it wasn't on that set that the shoe dropped in terms of being a PA.
I think that for Mutiny, for being on that set, a lot of the good mood and vibe is attributed to Alana, the director, and the writer, because she just had, I mean, if you don't know Alana, everyone should know her, and I need her to like blow up one day, because I know
she will. I believe it.
I definitely think that she's super talented and she can like really blow up. So I'm hoping she does, but she just has a way of working with everybody so well. And it's like she stays so calm, and it's like she was acting, she wrote that movie, and she directed that movie. So it was like she had a lot of things in her brain. And I loved how when she, like, if I needed to have a conversation with her, the first thing she would do, she's like, okay, Amber, is this an actor question, or is this director question, or is this producer question? Because she would like go into certain modes, and that's how she separated, and that's how she stayed like calm and stress-free. And it's just like, she just had such a respect for everybody, and it just, I think that overall tone just spread to all of us. And I mean, even so Mutiny is a short horror film about like a disease, sort of. It's kind of hard for me to log line this movie, but there was a really cool scene where she cuts herself, and I remember Scott, the stunt coordinator. He's one of my favorite people in the world. So many of my favorite people actually came from Mutiny, and it's so insane how, I mean, Darin, you said it was such a great set, and Kit said it was a great set. Like, I talked to almost everyone on that set, basically, still, and it's been like a couple years already. So, like, I remember him being such a go-getter, and then after he did that crazy stunt to make it look so realistic, I was really impressed. I was like, this is great, Scott. Like, we don't have to shoot this again. This is amazing. You're just like, Darin saved me time. Scott saved me time. I was like a happy AD on most those days on that set. And like, come to find out after the fact, Scott's like, I never did that stunt before. I was like, just try, like, I was problem solving, and I did it for the first time. And I was like, holy hell, like, he's really good at what he does. Like, people who can just problem solve like that and like, hey, let's figure this out, let's try it. Like, I love that mentality of like, no one says no. It's like that yes and improv mentality, and I love that set. So that's just one thing I just have to say about that set. But I mean, we're talking about good times, just we're talking about bad times. But I don't want to talk about. I
know. That. Well, we have to set up the contrast first.
Yeah.
Or else, you have to know what you lost in order to appreciate it.
Yes.
But
like I said, I'm really glad that Mutiny was the first set, and then it was the good one, so that when I got to a bad set, I was just like automatically like, no, I don't want this ever again. Get me out of here. Get back to Mutiny. Dang it.
Yeah. So I think that's why this is important to talk about horror stories and to actually have those bad experiences, because it didn't hit me how good I had it until I really got to a horrible set. So like, I think it's really good to have the contrast, because if you don't, it's like, how do you gauge? And it's like, your perception of being happy with certain things in your life and on set and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, well, this is boring. This and this. It's like, no, you have it really, really good because XYZ didn't happen, or, things are going smoothly. And it's like, I went through at least, 6 to 8 sets with no problems. And then I got hit with that 6-day shoot where, everything went wrong, and, the actor screamed in my face, and I thought I was untouchable. I was like, I am amazing. And then that set hit me with a dose of reality and was like, no, this is what happens. This is what you have to look for. These are the red flags. You know, I mean, it really takes you, like, I don't know how, I mean, Darin or okay, because you're in the midst of like writing a whole bunch of stuff now. Like you're about to just like take off into the writing world. But it's like when you're in prep and you're talking to producers, like certain red flags will go off and you're like, oh no, this is what I need to avoid. And I mean, Darin, how many projects have you said no to based on like red flags? Or are you just like, let's just try it?
Yeah, I'm always of the attitude that let's just try it. I don't say no very often. And that's, could be a good or a bad thing, but I thankfully haven't come across any scenarios where it's clear that, like, I don't know, there are bad actors involved, or like it's going to be a nightmare, or it's unsafe. Those are usually the places where I would say no.
Yeah.
Because almost always when you're entertaining a job, and film is no different than anywhere else, you're dealing with people, and every person has their own hangups. And I
Yeah.
think your success in film has a lot to do with how well you can get along with a wide variety of people. And for me, I try my best not to write anybody off. um like, even if they seem like they're coming out of left field or something seems a little different on them, I try to really ask, well, what is it about them? Could I still work with them? Is there anything here that will really get in the way of the work? And also, there's a lot of instances, and I think T11 is an example of this, the movie we're going to talk about, where sometimes you can't really tell in advance.
Yeah.
You wish for those clear big red flags that just tell you, no, go the other way, but you don't always get those. And sometimes the pressure of being on a film set, in particular when things aren't going well, reveals a lot about people. And it's can be a great thing. That's why we're saying, like, you get to know people so well so quickly. It's because you see how they handle pressure. It could also go against you when you see how they handle pressure.
Yeah.
And they start revealing that they don't handle it well, and you have to pick up the slack a little bit. And I think that's, if I were to look back on T11 and sum it up in one way, it would be that, and realizing that, the people that, in particular in the leadership positions, were under a lot of pressure. Understandably, they were spending a lot of their own money making
Yeah.
a feature film with a lot of people that were strangers, sometimes strangers in their own home. That's a really weird situation to be in. And I have a lot of empathy for people in that situation. I root for people in that situation because you're making your own stuff, and
Yeah.
everybody deserves support for that. I think where things can go wrong is where you cease to see the people around you as collaborators, and you start to see them as the enemy,
Oh
or
yeah.
as people that are there to get you or are there to steal your money. And as soon as that's why I feel like empathy is what makes the world go round, particularly on a film set. It's like, as soon as you lose empathy for the people around you, you're kind of sunk. Then you're at the mercy of the stress of the moment, and the stress of
Yeah.
the moment sometimes can get out of control. And if you don't have that empathy, and if you don't lean on the support of people around you, then it's pretty isolating, and then it can be pretty hard. And I think, for me, that's a big thing that happened on that film. Is there's a lot of stressful moments, and it ended up turning into a situation where, a lot of the crew was antagonized against the director and the producer. But I mean, maybe I should zoom out a little bit and give a little more context. So T11 was a movie that is finished now, is playing in some festivals.
Yeah.
Got into a festival in Australia last I heard.
Yeah, I remember the
Yeah.
Australian one. I think that it's on Amazon Prime already. I'm not sure. I have to look it
Oh,
up.
really? Okay.
I don't
Well,
know if I heard that through a grapevine or not. I have to, but I know the first movie obviously is on Amazon Prime. But
yeah. Well, that was a movie that Amber reached out to me, said, I'm the AD on this film. Would you consider being in the running as a DP? And I went and I interviewed with the director, and we went out to lunch, and I thought we got along pretty well. Like, I offered some of my ideas, and it's usually the first way that I test the waters if I'm working with someone, is I'll just go ahead and give my take on stuff. And if they like it, then I know that we're going to connect on stuff. And she really liked some of my ideas about the approach, the creative look of the film. And it ended up being that they chose me as a DP. So we did a pre-production phase, and from the beginning it was always meant to be a very formal production. I say formal because there's lots of different ways of making a movie. Sometimes your director is also your DP. It happens a lot with me. I direct and shoot for myself. But this was a movie where everybody had a clear defined role. There was going to be an AD, a script supervisor, second AD, me as a DP with 2 assistants. It was a very regimented production. And it was one of the reasons I was interested in it, because as someone that is kind of weird as a freelancer, I do a little bit of everything. I bounce around between all these very odd productions where I'll be the composer, director, DP, or the editor, composer, motion graphics artist. So I don't get a lot of chances to work in a very linear, formal, I would say traditional way. And it's a learning point for me. I enjoy that, and like being challenged to do things that I don't normally do. So I wanted to do that type of production. And as we got through pre-production, the first kind of, I guess you could call this a red flag. And I didn't take it as this at the time, but now looking back 2 years ago, I go like, oh, that was something that I've taken notice about, was I never got a clear idea of how much money they had to spend. And it has been a real learning that I took from that movie is no matter what role you're playing, if the budget impacts you, which, I mean, come on, it does, unless you're like just working for a day and you have a day rate. But as a DP, you need to know how much money the person has to spend so that you can budget, okay, what camera are we going to shoot on? How much grip and electric can we afford? Are we doing 1 truck or 2 trucks? How many assistants? It affects everything that you do.
Yeah.
And I was never able to get a clear answer. They gave me like kind of a range.
I think I asked them, I mean, that's a question for the AD as well, because I have to know their budget, because when it comes down to it, like, how many days, how much time, is there flexibility? Can we add on a day if we need to? Can we take away a day if it's, so, I mean, the budget, I think for Amber, a note for you as far as being a producer, if you don't know your budget, it could be a dumpster fire. It's, if you have no idea how much money you can, give to a production. And when I asked them how much what the budget was, I never got a clear answer on that. And it was kind of weird for me. And I'm like, I know they have money because my day rate was such and such. And I don't even remember my day rate, but you were like, oh, we have
2,000 a day.
Yeah. Right, yeah. One day. It's just like, they would kind of they never wanted anyone to know how much money. And that was kind of weird, because it's like, well, how are we doing this? Like, luckily I wasn't the line producer on this, but we'll learn that a lot of ways I became the line producer on a lot of different days, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. It was a weird situation. And as we went through pre-production, I was constantly having to revise my equipment list because, and this was the second red flag, is when something wasn't right, they would have a fear-based response. And what I mean by that is, oh, that's wrong. Oh, what are we going to do about that? Oh, no, we need to change that. No, we can't do that. The instant response was a kind of nervousness and anxiousness, as opposed to, do we need this? And like, there's a way to talk about anything that I feel like puts you both in a collaborative win-win mindset versus, this is a crisis. You need to solve it for me right now.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. And that was what would happen when I would submit these equipment budgets and they would see some of the estimates, and it was instantly kind of a panicked response. And I would go like, well, okay, I'm going to try to trim down, but it's kept rubbing up against what kind of movie I thought that I was working on, which is of a certain budget level. And as that proceeded, I had to keep on cutting things down to the point of when we were actually picking up the equipment, I was cutting C-stands live as we were loading onto the truck. Because I was getting a panicked phone call going, oh my God, I can't believe how much money we're spending on C-stands. And I'm like, okay, I'll take 5 away and maybe we'll double up. And I had to go onto the truck and pick them up myself and go like, sorry. And I said, sorry to my grip. I was like, sorry, that we got to take the C-stand away. And, it was kind of, it made me feel a little silly that kind of preparation needs to happen in advance and should happen in advance. And to have to do something like that, I was like, okay, whatever, maybe we're off to a rocky start, but I was still giving everything the benefit of the doubt because I ultimately hadn't even started shooting yet. Maybe sometimes these things happen and you just get into the flow of it and you can still have a good shoot. And then, gosh, and now I kind of am struggling to figure out where to fast forward to next, but maybe Amber or Kit, you guys could help me. When was the first moment on set that you guys kind of felt like,
the first moment for me, when I knew this was going to be a shitstorm, was when I drove up with my niece was one of the PAs on that show.
Oh, how is she? Cheyenne, right?
She's amazing. She got her first job, and it's great. We'll talk about Cheyenne later. Yay. But Cheyenne, obviously misses everyone on the set. That was her first job, and she was very excited to work on film. She's like, oh my God. Cheyenne's first set was a horror story for us, but for her, this was all learning for her, and she loved it. She loved every crazy moment that we went through, which was great. But me, Darin, Cheyenne, and my second AD, Will, we bond a lot because we were in the car together for hours. Oh my goodness. So the first time that I knew that something was like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right, was when we drove to location in New Jersey. The first one was New Jersey. And they're like, okay, this is where the main actress is going to sleep in this house. And I was meeting everybody, the night before we were supposed to start shooting. And across the street was another house that was supposed to be crew accommodation. So I believe, Darin, I don't know when you showed up that day or night or whatever, but I remember
the night before shooting.
Right, the night before. I was there as well the night before, but somehow me and Darin, the first AD and the DP, ended up in an accommodation that was 45-minute drive away. And that was not what was arranged. And I was told that was, because I told them, I was like, I don't mind driving to location, but if I'm going to stay there, I don't have to keep driving my car because, gas, miles, all these things, tolls. You have to think about all those things when you're taking a job, So I was like, okay, I'll drive to this location. It was I think about an hour and a half or something away from my house. So I knew I was staying there, but accommodation was so sketchy. It was wait, where am I staying? And they were like, oh, it's only 15 minutes away. That's what they told me. And then it ended up being a 45-minute drive away. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I have to do this every day? I took this job so I didn't have to do a commute thing, So and that's when I was like, okay, well, this is just like regular working in New York, whatever. I'm taking an hour commute or something. So the accommodation was the first thing, where some of the crew members, and I'm not saying anyone else is important, but there's a certain level of comfort or respect or something or privilege even that comes with the DP, the director, and the first AD. Because those three minds are the three people that come together to make all these things happen on set. And the fact that you were putting more stress on the first AD and the DP just based on accommodation was like, what the hell is this? So I don't know how you feel about that, Darin, but I know your sleep and my sleep, the fact that we had to get up an hour earlier than everybody else was no, we should not, have less hours of sleep. I mean, especially when we're talking about 12, 14-hour days. And still have an hour commute when we're out in the boonies in New Jersey. It was crazy. So the crew, the crew members ended up staying across the street from set the first week. So I was like, how did this even happen? So accommodation was a huge issue. And it was a huge issue all the way through. It was like, okay, we're going to have these RVs. There's air mattresses. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, now I'm locked into this job. We have to make the best of it. But oh my goodness, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, they were not prepared for the number of people that would need to sleep because Amber said New Jersey, but it's deep New Jersey, rural New Jersey. So we're out there.
Forest Jersey, not even just the city, right a hop across away from
not Jersey City. It was very, very far away from the city. So
and there was nothing around. There's nothing around. It was very rural. It was very isolated. And it's not like, we're out of set and then we all go, even to a restaurant. There were no restaurants around. There were just houses. And so I really think that there was no thought about, well, how are people sleeping? Because when we got to the house that we would stay at, um, the the thought was that everybody would either sleep on the floor or on couches,
Yeah.
because there were only two bedrooms. Um, I think there was just one bedroom with a bunk bed.
Yeah, that
And
was
then,
where me and Cheyenne stayed. Thank God.
yeah,
Like,
so Amber and Cheyenne had the bunk bed, and then everybody else, they thought, oh, they'll just sleep, bring your sleeping bag, sleep on the couch.
but
And
that's not
that
what they.
was,
And this is my hang up for the producers. I mean, and the director, because if these were their houses, and it's
yeah,
like they didn't tell people that. They had people sign on to this job saying, we'll have a bed for you, we'll have accommodation, don't worry, it's going to be, it's going to be fine, we're going to have enough room for everybody.
yeah,
And it turned out to be, oh no, when you're there, you're like, well, I mean, should I have brought blankets? Like, should I, like
yeah,
you didn't know what situation you were going into because they promised you something and then delivered something completely different, that's
yeah.
just like
And I
recipe
think
Oh
for
my
disaster.
God.
that's kind of where the problems began, because of course when you're put in that position, no matter what role you're playing on a set, um it impacts your performance, it impacts the work that you need to do, notwithstanding just the time spent on the road. If you're
Yeah.
adding 2 hours a day, almost 2 hours a day on the road, above and beyond what you're putting in on set, and then you get back to the house and you're sleeping on the floor, would that have been something other people would have signed up for? It begs the question.
Yeah.
And so then fast forward a little bit, you know people start communicating this to the producers in some tactful and untactful ways, that this is not what we all expected, this is not working for us. And also, oh yeah, this was the biggest thing, is they weren't including dinner in our
Yeah.
our days.
I can't believe
So
I had to have that conversation. There
yeah,
were so many conversations about meals. And I had to sit down with the producer and the director, and I said, guys, you cannot not include dinner. And they're like, what do you mean, Amber? I was like, look, are in rural New Jersey. No one has anywhere to go. Not all of us have cars. Either, you have to tack on extra money or you have to feed us dinner. You have to.
mhm,
And it was like, I hate having those kinds of conversations with producers because it's like human, like we're all human beings. We all have to
yeah,
eat dinner. And while the producer and the director, we were in like near where they live, their home, it was like, we don't live here. We don't know where to go. Our GPS is not working because we're in the sticks here. Like
yeah,
there's
Right.
no
Like you're
resources
so
for us to
far
go.
deep that like you barely have internet service. So
Yeah.
our GPS and our phone's
yeah,
gonna work.
Yes.
Oh no.
So it was like a constant thing. It was like crafty was an issue. I had to speak to them about crafty. It was like, the breakfast, and I mean, me and Cheyenne, Darin, and Will in my car, we would always stop at Quick Check to have our breakfast because we knew breakfast
yeah,
was going to be completely, and me being celiac now, oh God, this is a whole thing. Anyone on set, there's so many different types of people who have like allergies, they're vegetarians, they're, vegan. And as a producer, you have to be prepared for all those situations. If you're paying for their meal or you're ordering food for a whole crew, it's like you have to take those people into account. I was a special case because I had celiac and, the whole wheat gluten thing. They did not understand what I could and couldn't eat. And it was like every day was a constant lesson in celiac with them. It was completely frustrating. And I was like, can I just have like some fruit and some like protein? Like it was like a thing that I'm like, I can't believe I had to explain this. And it was like a very personal thing that I didn't want to be made a big deal. Then it was a big deal because I was the only one that had that. It was very strange. But
yeah.
every meal was a struggle on that set. And it was like so frustrating. I had to talk to them about food every single day.
Yeah. I think that the big thing that I have, looking back on it, I think it was approached as a traditional production with all these people. But really the movie should have been a run and gun indie feature.
Yeah.
It should have been made with a crew of maybe 4 or 5 people, who are like really young, maybe it's their first thing, maybe one or two people are more experienced, tell them that, hey, we'll put you up on the couch. It won't be the greatest payday, but it's going to
You
be
have a
like
feature film under your belt. You know,
you're
you
going to
have
get a
that.
feature film under your belt. So I think it was always on the wrong foot, because of that, because they were hiring all these people and there wasn't enough planning put into the fact that these are all working professionals. These are all people that they hired to do this for a living and that are going to have certain expectations. And Amber, going back to what you said about, or Amber Krieg, about what you said about knowing the ins and outs of unions and stuff like that. It was not a union production, but I think some of the same thinking applies. Is you have to recognize that, you know, a 19-year-old kid who's never done anything before is kind of excited to be anywhere and is excited to sleep on the floor and is excited to get a film credit. But someone that has other features under their belt, who's more experienced, who this is another job for them, is going to have a completely different set of expectations. And if you're not ready for that, then you're kind of driving straight for a brick wall, which is what happened on that film. Is that on the one hand, you had the producers, the director, who were thinking of it like, you know, they were shooting with a bunch of 19-year-olds who, you know, they should just be grateful that they're getting a pizza. And then you had the crew who were all working professionals that had multiple credits, who
like who
had
have worked on union sets. So we know
who
how
had certain standards of how accommodation should go, what your commute should look like, what your pay should look like, what meals should look like. That has become kind of a standard for a reason, is because you have a certain range within which you can function. And if you go outside of it, then you might get poor results. You know, if you're underslept or underfed, or if you're irritated, or if you don't have a good place to go tonight, it's not going to spell you being able to think your way through any job, let alone the job of a DP, an AD, any like leadership position on set. But also like just as a PA, if you haven't slept, unless you're, just a little young thing and you can just keep going for
you can
7 days
function on like 1 hour sleep.
yeah, then it's going to cause problems for you. So you have to allow for the human factor. And that was the biggest kind of learning from that. So one of my regrets, and an empathy for them as well, because I don't want to just rag on them.
Yeah.
I think they had good intentions, and it could have been a much smoother production had they just scaled it way down to what they were comfortable with. And I think they put themselves, and then all of us, in a position of not having enough resources and still having to deliver a certain level of production. And had the film been just a few, close-knit people shooting all natural light, no grip and electric, it might have been a much different shoot. In fact, I know it would have been a very different shoot.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that was.
Darin, I want to. So I know we're talking about the mechanics and logistics of like a horrible set, but what moment on set do you remember being like, "Oh my God, this is a situation that, like, holy shit, I can't believe this just happened"? Like, do you remember any type of moment?
Oof. Well, I mean, you got to talk about the last day.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think what I was gonna bring up was day 11.
So, okay, the day number. Okay.
The day I remember.
Was I there?
I believe you were, because we were shooting in that house. So day 11, we've been shooting for 10 days. This is day 11. We had 1 day off, and
okay, I remember now.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of your first days, but we had 1 day off in 2 weeks, and we were all very stressed out. I remember just all of us being on edge. We're trying to make the best of it. And for me, everything's been piling up. And I remember we were in that bedroom and Isha, bless her heart, we get along now. It's great. I'm glad we worked past the whole thing. But she was a script supervisor. And with every script supervisor, they have like their own setup. And she would like to type on her computer as we were rolling, while I don't
Okay, I
understand
remember this.
why she would do that, but it was creating a noise. And I was like, I kept looking at her, and then the director's looking at me, and she's like, could you get her this? Like, she kept like doing the side eye to me as we're rolling, and I was like, I can't yell at her now. We're rolling about this. Like, I can't do it. So it was irritating me all day, and it's been irritating me for the past 11 days. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is ruining sound. And I kept looking at our boom guy, and I'm like, how is he not hearing this? Like, it's clear as day. So if sound guy says it's fine, okay, it's fine. But the moment that it started to annoy the director, I had to say something, because I don't want a bitchy director. I don't want her to be cranky. So like, I remember like we're cut, and I said like, I was like, my teeth were like gritting, because my go-to.
I was right next to you, and I felt that. I was just feeling all the
my go-to when I'm stressed out is I just get fucking angry. Sorry to F-bomb it, but I get really angry, and I've really tried to like let go of that stuff. Just now I AD a lot better, because I'm like, manage my anger. Don't get angry. It's okay. Things happen. But then I was so angry. I just was like, my whole body is like tensing up and gritting my teeth. And I was like, Isha, you have to stop tapping. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was very tense.
You have to stop clacking noise. Remember, I was right next to you, and I felt all your vibes, and I was just like, oh God, is it directed at me? No, it's not directed at me, but it could be. Let me shut up.
And I remember everyone stopped for like 2 seconds and was like looking at me. And then Darin broke the silence, and Darin goes, everyone just relax. Everyone just cool out. And I was like, thank God for Darin, because Lord knows.
You would have unleashed if it was for Darin's zen. Because I was like I said, I was feeling your vibes, and then I was like getting like some of like Darin's like cool vibes. So it was like a weird air for me, because like I'm a very vibey person. I can physically feel someone's vibes.
Yeah.
I can physically tell when somebody's upset, because it's so uncomfortable. So yeah. There was a lot of that. So
yeah, it was. I remember that day now that you described it, Amber, because it was like, and well, this is a great note for producing. There's a reason why you never want to work a certain number of days in a row without a day off.
Yeah.
And I learned that on that movie, is because what was it? We had 6 days on, 1 day off,
and then I think it was 5, or maybe it was 6, 1 day off, and then we were doing 5 more days.
5, right? So there was at the end of that second run where we'd had a day off, but it was just 1 day after 6 days, and then we were on like day 5 of the next 5 days. And I don't know if you've ever been around a whole group of people that are all sleep deprived.
Yeah.
But nobody can think.
Yep.
Everybody's intelligence drops like 30 points.
It's probably even more than that.
Probably even more than that. Like I at one point, I remember this day, I was operating the camera, and at one point during the scene, I was supposed to pan away from one character who finished talking, and then pan to a second character who was going to start talking. And I just didn't do it. I was pointed at one actor, and when they finished talking, I just froze.
I remember that. I totally remember that.
And nobody else picked up on it too. Everybody else was watching the monitor,
yes.
And that was a thing that the DP was supposed to do, and nobody said anything, because everybody was so dumb.
We were fried. All of us were just, our brains were fried.
And it was then that I realized, oh shit, this day isn't even halfway done, and I am an idiot right now. I can't even remember what my job entails. And so this is why you want to work 5 days, 2 days off.
And the thing is, scheduling, as far as like the ADs go, I tried to get 2 days off. I really tried. I pushed for it, and they were like, no, because we need this many days at this location, and we can't go back. And I'm like, there's no way for us to get another day off. It was like, I was trying to because as an AD, it's like, you can only do so many things. There's only so many miracles that you can push the producers to do. It's like, hey, this will work out better. This is what we should do. And like, as an AD, it's like, I have to worry about morale, and I have to keep the human factor in my mind to make sure that we can get the best out of everybody. And they just were like, no, we need 6 days here and we're not going back. It'll be a waste of money and time and this. And I was like, I'm just letting you know that this is creating a situation that's going to stress us out. And they did not care. They were like, we're going to do what we can.
They didn't care. It's kind of seemed like they didn't care until it started affecting them. Like, like that's when it started getting, cause I got snapped at a couple of times. I'm just like, listen, like I came here as a favor to Amber, not even to you. Like, what is this? Like, you're lucky I need the money. I'm about to move. Like, I was like, I'm not.
Which goes back to, what I was saying before is like, as soon as you stop seeing the people around you as collaborators and you start to see them as working against you or being a burden, then you're kind of sunk. And then a stressful day like that, which honestly, if everybody had gotten along well.
That was supposed to be an easy day. That was supposed to, we were shooting in one room.
It would not have been as big of a deal. Yeah. But already there was antagonism and there was resentment that was piling on, which I get, if you have a group of people around you that you don't like that are forcing you to spend a bunch of money, everybody's going to have a target over their head, and that's a terrible place to be in. But that was a very stressful day. And that was largely the reason. But I should also say that at that point I was commuting from Brooklyn because the sleeping accommodations just were not working. Like I couldn't sleep on the floor anymore. The couches were too short for me. I was too tall for the couches. So my legs would just dangle off the end. So I was like, look, I rented a car. I spent my own money to rent a car and I drove the 90 minutes each way from Brooklyn to deep New Jersey, which honestly turned out better because every day I could have a shower. There was only one shower at the location too. Yeah, and every day I could, see my wife and sleep in my own bed that fit me, and have a change of clothes and all that. So I was doing that commute every day. So I was also particularly exhausted that day for that reason. But it was tough. And when you see people that sleep deprived and stressed out, people start to pick at each other too, which is tough. And that was a really tough moment. And I think you always have to check yourself as much as you can when you're in those stressful moments. And I had to do this all the time.
I did not check myself.
Well, these are the learning moments we go through.
I'm not gonna lie. I consider myself like pretty mild tempered. Like I do what I got to do. I keep my head down.
Yeah, I can vouch for that statement. I think you're very level-headed and you're very calm. But man, I feel like you were about to snap on that show.
I was about to lose my mind. I think and I still feel bad about this. I'm apologizing again in advance for this story. But like there was a moment where me and Amber almost got into it. And it wasn't even like, it was like an issue within us. It was like just in the production thing. Like, it was something about like, you told me to like clean up my stuff. And I was just like, I have nowhere to put it. And then you were like, well, you just got to clean it up. I'm like, where? I was like, where do you want me to fucking put it? Like,
yeah.
So like we almost got into it. And me and Amber are like, you know what I mean? So like, that was like the moment where I was just like, all right, no, like this, I'm getting like mad tired of this. I can't do this. Like, I was like, oh God. So, I was like, I like Amber. Like, no, don't make me do this. Like, but it just started getting like out of hand after a while. I was just like,
which is why,
Yeah, go ahead, Darin.
Well, I think just to zoom out from it, there's a reason why there's a process to making a film. It's not just arbitrary, and the more work that you do in film, you realize there's a reason for pre-production. There's a reason for making a budget. You're not just doing it because other people do it. It's because you do it because you need to plan. And if you don't plan, then things go wrong that don't need to be going wrong. And Amber was fighting the good fight and trying to plan well and just going, people are going to be fried on this day if we're working this much. So the schedule should always be made with people in mind, as anything should. You should always include the human factor because people are not just numbers that you can move around. People get impatient. People get stressed. It's human nature. And you have to allow for that. And if you're stuck in a situation where that hasn't been planned for as a factor, then everybody's going to hate everybody. You know, it's just not going to be a good situation. And even people that like each other are going to start to get irritated
Yeah.
with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Uh,
last day, I don't even remember how all that started. I just remember the end result of me having this. Now, okay, to preface this, I'm fairly outspoken, and usually ADs are, we're the voice of the set, we're the people who have to communicate. I get that. But the whole challenging and yelling at me, I'm like, there's only so much of that I will take. And behind closed doors, I was doing a lot more than people saw with the producers. Like, there was an issue with contracts with every crew member. They wouldn't sign their crew deal memos. So that was one thing that I had to keep going. There was one moment where someone didn't get paid on time. I had to deal with that. The meals were an issue. Overtime was talked about all the time. There were so many things that I had to have meetings about people they didn't like. I had to convince them not to fire the key grip on the show. It was like, listen, we are not in a space to fire our key grip right now. We can't find someone who's going to fill in, and we're going to be screwed. It was like I had to break these things down for them. And the moment I realized that me and this producer were going to have a falling out was when she said, I signed the checks. I pay you, and you have to make sure that they know that. And I'm like, that's not my job. I am not the enemy. If anything, I am the friend of the crew. I'm supposed to be the crew's friend if I want the best out of them. And they really wanted me on their side. It was like this us versus them thing. And I'm like, but we're trying to make this movie for you. Like, we're trying to make this movie for you. Like, we're doing this movie for a reason, you know? So by the end of that whole thing, and the last day, we were shooting in a nursing home.
mm-hmm.
Was that right? A nursing home. And there was a scene that we had to shoot in the broiler room, which I hated that whole thing. I was like, I do not really want to shoot in a broiler room. Everything was like questionable. And then this whole thing started, and I swear to God, I think about this at random times. I didn't check the call sheet that Will put out thoroughly enough. Will was my second AD, and I guess what happened was lunch was supposed to be ready at a certain time. In my head, always, any crew, any project, always the first meal is 6 hours after crew call. Union or not, it's just what you do. 6 hours after crew call, you have your first meal. And we had SAG actors on set, so obviously for them not to get meal penalties and all that stuff, we had to break. So, and I mean, that's just getting into union stuff for you guys, but even on indie sets, there are still union rules that have to apply because you have SAG actors sometimes. So you still have to follow the rules. And for some reason, on the last day, the producer chose to actually look at the call sheet and decide that lunch was going to be that time. And I didn't notice the mistake. And I swear to God, I think about this all the time. I'm like, if only I had caught that typo. My second AD put lunch an hour too late. And the producer planned for that lunchtime that was on the call sheet. And she usually checked with me every day about when we were going to break for lunch. But that day, we had gotten to the point where we weren't communicating anymore. And it's really bad when the AD and the producers aren't communicating anymore. So she refused to talk to me at this point, and she didn't talk to me all day. And then I was like, why is the food ready? That's always my question when I'm reaching the point of like, we need to break soon. Like an 5-hour mark, I'm like, I'm looking at my PAs or my second AD. I'm like, are they setting up lunch? Is lunch going to be ready? Because if lunch isn't ready, I can't break people on time, and that's a problem for SAG and production. It's more money. It's a whole mess. So I have to make sure we break. And it was a whole thing, and I can't remember how it started, why she was like, you know, oh, she started calling me a bully. She's like, Amber, you're a bully, and you're this and that, and I can't believe. And I'm like, holy hell, like, what is this? And it just like, big thing where it was like, no one was setting up lunch. So I started doing it. So she was offended by it, me starting to set up lunch. And she was very mad that I did that. And she's like, your call sheet said this time. And I was like, oh no. So like, my mistake that I didn't catch the typo. And I'm like, I cannot believe she didn't check with me, because we've been communicating about checking lunch. So there's like so many layers of like who was wrong in the situation. But like, I just blew up, and we were screaming back and forth, and I was just like, I was ready to go home, and I was like, Darin, I went outside. I was like, oh my God, I was so stressed out. I was like, I'm ready for this to be over. And then like Darin came out to talk to me. Like, I think Cheyenne came out to talk to me. And then Isha, I was not expecting her to come out. And she says, Amber, I want to let you know that the crew stands behind you. We're all in agreement that the production is crap. And she's like, we know that you're fighting for like, you know, the better things for us to like function as a production. But like, I remember all I remember is us yelling back and forth. I feel like my brain's been trying to block that out. Like, just probably because that one typo on the call sheet that's like, oh my God, I can't believe on the last day I had one typo that like changed the vibe of the whole thing, or made it worse for that matter.
Yeah. And also that this was well after midnight on a day that was, we had an overnight at this location. So everybody was on edge. And actually there's so many things that happened that night. The other thing that happened was there was an actor who was only had one role to play. This was the day that we were filming this scene where one of the main characters sees a prostitute behind his workplace.
Oh, that's right. The alley. That's right. I completely forgot about that.
Actor who was playing the prostitute, for reasons I don't know, didn't realize that she was playing a prostitute. So she showed up on set, and when she realized what her role was, she walked off.
I could not believe that. I was like, how did she not know? Did they not tell her what she was playing?
Her?
We were all shocked when this news came out. And I was like, wait, who's going to play and then what ended up happening is that the director, right? She played the prostitute in the truck, I believe, right? That's what ended up happening.
Yeah, well, it's there was a whole series of things that happened pretty rapid fire. Like that happened. And then Amber, what you described happened. So then at that point, myself and a bunch of other people and Amber were outside trying to recover from what had just happened. I was thinking in my head, we're not going to finish this movie. Like, how can we keep shooting? We don't have the actor that's supposed to play this part. And as far as I can see, nobody wants to continue shooting at this point.
Yeah.
And then what I found out was that while Amber and I were outside talking, the director had gone around to the female crew members and just asked each of them if they would play the prostitute.
That's right. I remember this. Yeah.
And
no.
but, in kind of in front of everybody, which is a little awkward.
Yeah, that puts people on the spot, and it's like no, like don't like making people like feel afraid to say no. It's weird.
And so she got a yes under pressure from this one crew member who came out and told me and Amber about what had happened, that she's not comfortable with it. She doesn't want to do it, but she felt forced to do it. So then that elicited a conversation where, we were all telling her, no way should you have to do this. And then we talked to the director and we were like, she felt forced to do this. We shouldn't make her do it. That's not an option. The crew shouldn't be obligated to play it. And then it ended up being that the director decided to play the prostitute herself. And this was all happening pretty quickly, one thing after the other. And pretty soon it's like 3:30 a.m., 4 a.m. And it's a day that was supposed to end at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
If everything had gone according to plan, but all these little fires, were going off. And then I think what really clinched it for me was the director wanted to find the right wardrobe to wear as the prostitute. So it took about 30 minutes to try on different wardrobe options. And then we finally started shooting the scene. And I think we wrapped just as the sun was coming up. And then we got in a car. This was in Long Island. Got in the car and drove back.
Oh man, I was so tired.
We were all so tired. It was the last day of shooting, and then we all just like hugged each other and said goodbye. But it was kind of like every problem in the film all compacted into that last 6 hours of the day.
Wow. I'm not gonna lie. If I was there, I would have found my way somehow to the LIRR, and I would have been like, deuces, I'm out. I don't even care about this last day. I'm out.
Yeah.
Get me out of here.
That's where I was. And I remember that whole blowout happening with me and the producer. I just told Darin, I was like, there's no way I can finish this day. There's just no possible way I can go back in there and run the set like nothing ever happened. Like, it's okay, guys, we're all okay. Because I knew the status, how everyone felt about everybody, and you know. And the one thing that really rubbed me the wrong way, and I guess it ties into the empathy that Darin was talking about, is that the director had this no big deal type of attitude when people had problems. It was like, well, why not? Or, you know, what's wrong with sleeping on the floor? Well, what's wrong with just having yogurt for breakfast? Or what's, you know, it was just like very, well, I'm okay with it. Why isn't everyone else okay with it? It was like this weird realization of like, she is not around a lot of people, or she just doesn't think that people are different. It was very strange. It was all very strange. I remember that after that being all over, I thought I was horrible as an AD. I didn't work for anything very much after that. I didn't want to do any freelance work. I didn't want to get on set as an AD. I was kind of not to be like weird about it. Like, we joke about like being traumatized after this, and I didn't want to work on anything. I was like, let me go back to being a barista for a little while. I cannot be back on set. I really needed like to, you know, a palate cleanse. And that's when I worked on one of my friends' like little web series. And he's like, Amber, I can't afford you. I was like, you're a friend of mine. I love what you do. Just like, I need this just to get like a good vibe of me working on set. Cause I almost didn't come back, you know, and that sounds really dramatic, but it was like so bad for me.
Dramatic at all. Like people don't realize, like, there are some things that'll make you be like, I don't want to do this anymore. But then like you end up, but then like in order to combat that, especially if you know it's something that you want to do, like if you ever get into a moment, like this is just advice for everybody. If you ever feel like there's a moment in time where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, you need to have that moment where you just have to, like, well, for me, what I say to people is like, you got to have a real conversation with yourself, like sit down and have a conversation with yourself and reevaluate, recalibrate your vibes, all that good stuff. I'm all about like
walk away for a second,
walk away for a little bit, like all that kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. And then if after all of that, like exhaust all of those options, and then if you ever come back to yourself and recenter and everything, and then you decide that this is not what you want to do, drop out. But if you decide that this is what you want to do and this was just that one bad traumatic experience, that's when you should keep pushing forward. So like, to other people it may seem like, oh, you're being dramatic, like why would you ever say, like, no, like stuff like that actually happens. And that's when you really need to like sit down with yourself and be like, yo, like, do I want to do this anymore? And then like once you decide like, yes, I do want to do this, this was just a really horrible experience, then it's like, okay, then that's when you could come back and be like, ha 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 ha, I could talk about my traumatic experience.
I did that too. I'm like, I didn't work in film for a whole month after that show, for a whole month.
And that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal.
And then because, like, I guess when you work in film, I mean, this is more personal and whatever, but I always have this like doubt. And I remember talking about this on set. We were at the beach, Darin, and remember that one PA, he was like, Amber, how are you keeping, like, what does your job entail? How are you keeping all this in your head? Like, how are you doing this? And I was like, well, and I told him, I was like, there's always a moment, there's always something in the back of my head that says, you are not doing this the right way, or you're not, it's like that self-sabotage, or that like not being worthy of of what you can do as a person and how you are bringing, you know, your best to the table. And I always had that self-doubt when I'm on a set, because I'm always scared that something's going to go wrong. And that's just like nerves and stuff, like where something can go wrong, something could be unsafe, something, you know. So I'm always waiting for that moment, but it's like, I don't want to misstep. And that's like, I'm constantly worried in the back of my head of like, oh my God, this is going to be, you know, I'm going to do the wrong thing. So, and I think you just have to be, I don't know, one with yourself when you're working in film, because you're really, everything, like you said, Darin, everything's just so magnified. So any little problem that you have, it's going to come to surface. I mean, at least that's how I feel like.
I think so, totally. I mean, and Kit, you said it really well. It's like, I think it's important to check in with yourself. And going back to what I was saying at the beginning of all this is that at the end of the day, you should be doing, forget film, just whatever you're doing. I feel like you should be doing what you're doing because you enjoy doing it. And you could disagree, go like, well, sometimes you got to do what you don't enjoy, which is true. But I think particularly when you're talking about something like a career, especially in film, I think you have to stay in touch with what it is it that brought you in this in the first place. What is it that you enjoy about it? What keeps you interested and engaged? And it's important to check in with that, not just after like bad things happen, but just in general. I find it useful for myself to just always go like, am I still interested? Am I still engaged? Am I still having fun? Because if you're not, then sometimes it can get away from you, and then all you have is stress, and you're disconnected. But if you're still enjoying it, you'll find a way back to it. And maybe you find a way back to it and the context changes. Maybe you've reframed it. Maybe even you're working in a different role than you were before. A good friend of mine had a career as a director in Brazil, directing commercials, high-end commercials, and he gave it up. And now he just works as a broadcast cameraman, and he's much happier. So sometimes you reach these crossroads where you're still interested, but you just don't want to do it the same way anymore, either because you had something bad happen to you or you don't want to get burnt out. I think you have to allow those chapter turns to happen in life and in your career. And you have to get to those crossroads and be okay with taking a left turn or a right turn. Or maybe you check in, you realize, no, ultimately I'm on the right path. I want to keep going. But certainly these horror stories, these moments force you to do that. They force you to reevaluate. And for me, I definitely had my own version of that after this movie, where it's not that I wanted to stop doing any of this, but I definitely didn't want to get into that situation again where I felt like that there wasn't an atmosphere of mutual respect, that there wasn't like a care of people.
Yeah.
And it also teaches you your values. I mean, at the end of the day, what I cared the most about on a film set are the people, and they're the things that make everything else possible. They make the stress bearable. They make the funds more fun. So I think my value is people first, and having worked with people, and this film set wasn't unique in that sense. Working on film sets where it wasn't people first, I knew where I belonged. I knew where I could do my best work. And if I wasn't on a set like that, then I was never going to be able to do my best work. And I think there are things that I could have done differently had I not been so distracted by just the negativity, the people not being taken care of. That is just like not getting enough sleep. It's distracting, and it doesn't help, and it doesn't help you do your job. For me anyway. I mean, maybe some people enjoy being yelled at. Maybe some people enjoy, maybe it helps them do their job, and like, I wouldn't be able to work with those types of people. And I think that's what I really learned is like, there's a certain situation that I need to be in to do my best. And also to feel like I'm in the right place, that I'm really being valued and the people around me are being valued. So it really teaches you to check in on that. And I think I've become a lot more value driven. And at the time I was much more opportunity driven. I was much more interested in chasing after something because it was there. And now I'm really more interested in just working with people that I really respect as people first. And I will always work with Amber for that reason. Kit, I'll always work with you.
Yo, Darin, you're like my secret weapon. I don't care. Like, we worked on 3 different things. Like, after C11, we did a music video together, like, I think a year after that. Yeah, because it was last summer. That's right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I love working with Darin, and I think you are a unicorn. And I say that because you do care about people. And I've worked with many a DP where they just don't care about people. And that's probably, and like, they're not as collaborative as you, and not, you have special traits where it's like, you're a problem solver. Whereas a DP is like, this is a problem I have, you figure it out. Like, straight to my face, it's like, oh, all right. Like, I know that's my job, but it's just like, there's just a finesse you know, sometimes you have with people. And I don't know. I mean, same. I would work with Darin in a heartbeat. I would work with Kit in a heartbeat. So, and like there are people, and there's a reason that, like, for example, Tim Burton will always work with Johnny Depp. You know, like there's a reason there's the big filmmakers will work with the same DP or the same director, will work with the same actor. And so it's when you have people that you like working with and you collaborate well with, and it's just always a good vibe on set, it's like you want to hold on to those people for dear life. And it's not an exaggeration. It's like, I will, you know, if someone says, hey, I need a DP, I will always recommend Darin, because I just know he brings you know, it brings everything to the next level. I feel like, I don't know. So
yeah, and I think you get what you give too, because you know, I feel like that also attracts other people of like minds to you. I think you have to give off and express your values. And if your values are like you want to be around people that respect other people, it starts with you. You have to give that out. No matter what role you're playing, you have to project that. You have to live that, and you will find your people. You know, you will find other people that want to work that way too, and those become your film family. And I think that's really how anything good comes out of a business like film, is through the relationships. And I think it's important to figure out, well, how do you want to work? What's your working style? And you might learn it through some of these horror stories. You might learn it through some of the things that go well, or you might already just have an inherent sense, just as a person, how you want to work and what kind of people you want to be around. But I would say always stay focused on that first, and that will take you where you want to go. And then just bring your best ideas to whatever role you're playing. But I'm curious from you guys, Amber and Gio, we've been talking quite a bit. And
yeah.
how does all this resonate with you? And has it been helpful? I hope so. But
Yeah.
tell me, like, what you take away from all this.
Yeah, well, my take is that like any other industries, it's the people that make things happen. So if the people that are working are miserable and their you know, their basic needs are not met, then everything's gonna go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose as far as my own concerns is, like, if I get into this and then a few years I start burning out, or even I start hating it, then you know, will it all be for nothing, or will it be all wasted time? Because what I did mention, this September actually I will be starting my university course, but I'm not quite sure if I want to do either business or film. I've been accepted for both, but I have to decide which of the two. So yeah, I just it's kind of a thing, like if I do this, will I regret it? If I don't do it, then what am I losing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
my sense, if I can respond directly to that, is that there's always so many possibilities in a profession like film, and even the things that you learn in film, I feel like it's cross training for a lot of different industries. You know, it's problem solving and being proactive, and I feel like um, there's a lot of people that I know that have PA'd in film but didn't continue in film, just because it wasn't for them. But the things that you learn in film, because film is so nonlinear and because it's such a weird way of working, you learn a lot of things about how to be scrappy, how to be solutions oriented, how to work with a wide variety of people that make working in an office seem like kids play, to be honest. I mean,
True
I
story.
feel like to deal with some of these situations that come up, you know, like shooting in another person's home that is not okay with you being there, but then, you know, having to figure out what time is lunch being served in their bedroom. It's just like you're never going to have these situations outside of film.
That's
And
so true.
if you can rise to those occasions and figure out how to work through those situations for which there's no playbook, I feel like that serves you as a person no matter where you end up. So I would encourage you to challenge yourself with whatever those opportunities are, and knowing that you can take, that's not going to be time wasted, I don't think.
Yeah,
Especially if you're,
I wouldn't categorize, because I feel like you're just gonna learn about yourself. You're gonna learn about the world. It'll be an experience. I mean, for me, it's like kind of like looking at your past relationships when you break up for like, you know, oh, I was with
yeah,
this person for 4 years. Was it a waste of time? No, because with each person you meet in your life and each thing you do, there's something you can take away from that. There's something you can learn. There's something that, you know, they were there for a reason. And I really believe in that. I know a lot of people are like, oh, universe, this and that. But I think that for each person or each thing that you encounter in your life, it's not a waste. There's always something to take away. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah.
So, Darin, I'm sorry to cut you off, Kip. I know Darin has to run in a few minutes. Do you guys have any questions? Because I want to block out time, and Darin, you can run if you need to, about any film industry things. I want to
oh
open
yeah,
up if anyone has any questions about that. Outside of horror stories, you know, anything that you guys want to know, please let me know before we wrap it up.
Well, I recently found out that there are many trainee schemes here in the UK. So that could be an option of getting my first PA job. So I just want to hear your thoughts, really, about trainee schemes.
About what are you saying? What game? Sorry.
Trainee schemes.
I mean, if that is something that is coming up and you're able to PA, is that like just something that you're saying that is an opportunity that you can see as something that you can PA on, or do you have a connection into that where you can actually jump on and be a PA?
Yeah, it is an opportunity that I can go after. It's basically some of the casting companies here, that something that they offer. So yeah, trainee schemes. And yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts, but I don't know if they have that there. Although,
sorry, you're saying Chinese what?
trainee.
Oh,
Trainee.
trainee.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, trainee, like trainee programs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
Oh, okay. So like you're talking about training PA programs. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Oh, okay. So
Hmm.
if there are, I mean, here's the thing is that I mean, I do my own PA program, and I mean, those things cost money. So that's
Yeah.
the thing, is that like, how much money are they asking for? Not to be weird, but you
Well,
have to
no,
think about what you're going to get back from it.
I think in dollars it's about $200.
Okay.
And yeah.
So one of my first PA things, I actually took a PA boot camp in Los Angeles so long ago, but it was $285 for 2 days of training, and it was like 2 6-hour days or whatever. And I thought that had value because it exposed me to things I just didn't know, because I was an assistant camera and I didn't know how to be a set PA. So it taught me how to, you know, how to be a set PA. And if they are, I mean, are they helping you with your resume? Are they giving you recommendations on where to apply for jobs? I mean, they can give you the information, but it's actually, how are they going to elevate you into the industry, I guess, is the thing, right? Are you going to be recommended to any of their projects or their sets? Because I don't know what the connection might be. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I mean, your first day, if say you get a job, you put it on your resume that, hey, I've had PA training, and that's the only thing on your resume. It does help you. I will say that. At least you've been exposed to information of what you should be doing on set. So I don't think that it's like, I mean, I think that it's worth your time if that's something you want to do. It's, I mean, because everything that you do is going to be what you make of it, you know? So if you are thinking that this is something that I should do, then I would do it. I mean, $200 is actually kind of cheap, because I've seen other programs. I mean, mine is $175, but if I get someone on a set, their first day as a PA is, they're going to get at least $210. So I think about that. I think about the price point, and I think about what I'm giving them, because I give all my trainees a surveillance mic, which is worth $30. So like, I'm trying to give as much as I can to make it worth their while, you know? And if they are giving you all that they can, I think it's worth it. But I mean, I would say, if you don't want to spend money and you're trying to hustle to get on set, I mean, being a PA on a set for the first day and not knowing anything, you're thrown into the fire and you're going to learn so much on that first day. So you can go either way. It can work out either way for you, you know? I don't know if that answers the question. I went like really like real broad on that whole thing, but it's just like pros and cons.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Are there any other questions before we wrap it up? Amber, Christian, you guys can like
Yeah, so one question that I had, and this might even like be a whole other conversation, is just kind of what your world looks like right now with the current global situation, because productions seem to kind of be shut down, not happening. And so I'm wondering, how are you guys keeping yourselves busy? How are you still making connections to people? What are you doing during this like inactive time while you're waiting for things to pick back up?
I know for me, since I have Beyond Film School and my YouTube channel, I'm trying to make a video a week, trying to keep people informed on this whole situation. Like I just did the video today about, you know, being safe on set with all of the coronavirus and being, you know, filming in a pandemic world. Like I'm trying to keep people informed. I mean, that's my own personal projects as far as, sorry, my dogs are like playing. But yeah, I'm trying to keep myself busy because me and Darin were just talking about this before we actually jumped in with everyone else. And like I'm trying to do, you know, work on my websites, try to do these things so I can connect to people who are, you know, subscribers or fans of Beyond Film School. Because I think these conversations, like my whole thing is I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to get people like make them not feel like they're so far away from the world of filmmaking. You know, I'm staying connected to my film friends. This is why like I love that Kit is here because she is a friend of mine and we work together, and Darin as well. It's like, I mean, I haven't worked with him in a while, so it's like it's great. I was like, you know what? I feel like I want to have a conversation with Darin, and it's like it just reinforces our relationship a bit. And every time I do one of these, I try and add another film friend to, you know, to feel included with the people I've made relationships already with. So that's what I'm doing as far as like this whole thing. And, you know, I'm also, some people are asking me like, hey, Amber, have you heard anything? Or is anything prepping in New York? So people are having these conversations, at least in my circles. It's like, I don't have any jobs for anybody yet. So I don't have any really good news as far as like being on set. But I think the latest I heard was that filming should start in August in New York City. So, I mean, but this is, you know, all in development, you know, it's just every day it's a fluctuating situation.
Yeah, it's all fluctuating like in different places because, you know, Amber and Darin they're in New York. I'm actually in Los Angeles right now. So we were on phase 4. But because of that, some of the cases started spiking up. So some of the other like deadlines that were coming up in terms of like what's going to be done next, so on and so forth, they're like in limbo right now. Whereas everybody else is kind of like pushing forward, except for the states that started their phases early. So in my realm, filming was actually going to start in the next couple of weeks in LA, but that is now tentative. Like before it was like a definite, but now it's tentative because
I'm going to interject that they started shooting America's Got Talent, and they started shooting, I think The Bachelorette is supposed to be shooting now, like today. So
yeah,
reality is at least shooting.
Yeah, like some stuff like like they said they were going to start shooting in like mid to late July. Well, I mean, I didn't even realize we are in mid-July at this point now.
I know.
But some things are probably going to start getting pushed back because some of the cases started spiking up in places in California where things are going to be, and like LA got a little bit of a spike. So I'm like, no. But I'm in a different realm because like I'm actually on the writing side of things. So like people are like getting like, so people could still do like very limited gatherings with writing and Zoom meetings and all of that. So I can't talk too much about it, especially because we're recording right now, but I actually got a writing gig for a show. And so we're in the development of redoing the script and everything. And like, that's
awesome.
That's great.
All I could say right now. So we're getting the script ready for that now. And I actually have to meet up with the other, like the producers and everything later today. but like that kind of stuff, like it's rolling, but now it could be kind of like rolling back here in LA. So but I mean, that's where I am right now. So
Yeah, Darin, what are you up to? What are you doing? I know you're doing like, I mean, you have another, like, you're doing YouTube Live, I think, in like an hour or something. So
Yeah,
I know you have to go. I'm like, oh my God, he's having he's double session on Zoom or YouTube Live. So
yeah. It's been an interesting time. I think it's been a time when a lot of production has been reframed. I'm very lucky, and I say this every day. I really genuinely feel that I'm incredibly lucky because my income was not dependent on just one thing. Um, straddling the world of production and post production has helped me tremendously in this time, and also being a director. So I found myself directing a lot of very strange productions that are made up of Zoom calls and online events and animation, which is kind of the form that production has taken and is still largely in that form. Brands, clients, they all still want to produce stuff. And I found myself assuming a different role where I haven't touched a set, but I've been on my computer, like putting things together in a very active way. And I've beefed up a lot of things in my skill set in terms of animation, learning more about that and developing a lot of gigs that, wouldn't have come my way 4 months ago. So that's occupied a lot of my time and has become an entirely different avenue for me as a freelancer. And then musically, I've been staying really active. I give weekly concerts, which you guys are welcome to tune into. In an hour, I'm going to play a show of instrumental guitar music. So I play jazz and folk songs every week. And I had a band before all this happened. I had a 9-piece band, and we had shows lined up, and now we couldn't play them. So that it's been great to have a musical outlet to continue to work on that. And I've been doing a lot of composing, not just for my own projects, for other things as well. So it's been a busy time, but in a very different way than it has been before. And I feel like I'm not unique in the sense that other people have had to adapt to service a different way of shooting. A lot of people that are DPs that are used to working with a crew suddenly had to become one-man bands or one-woman bands, and learn how to shoot with smaller cameras all over again. So I think flexibility is the name of the game in film in general, but particularly in the last 4 months. We all have to be ready to do things that we haven't really done before. And I always take the approach of, throw yourself in there and learn as much as you can and never look back. Because I feel like film is such a rich place where there's always opportunity. And it's a very resilient industry in many senses because we're in an era where you can make a movie on your laptop. And we're lucky to be in that era, because if we were in the film era, then we truly would be sunk. But there's options out there. So if you're ready to adapt, learn something new, I've certainly found that to be a way to get through and to stay engaged in stuff. But like Amber was saying, film production is starting up again. I know that right now you're dealing with a patchwork of safety precautions. Some production companies seem to not care at all. Other production companies are being very cautious and requiring masks and gloves. And I think we're going to continue to see this kind of patchwork approach, which is mimicking the approach across America, really. Like some places are more safe than others.
yeah.
And that's going to continue for a while. So I think everybody, particular for people that are getting into this for the first time, it's an interesting time to be
Yeah.
like entertaining the film business, because the landscape has changed, and I think it will be different for quite a while to go. But I have to run, guys. I wish I could stick around. This is not to interrupt the conversation, which I sure will continue for all of you. But it was a pleasure being here. Amber, thank you so much for
Thank you,
having
Darin,
me.
for being here. Thank
Kit, it
you.
was great to see you. And I hope it was helpful for everybody. So
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Darin.
enjoy. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right.
So I'm so glad that Darin joined us. I feel like he's such a plethora of knowledge. But Christian wants to share a horror story. I want to hear it. Let's hear it.
Hey guys, it's good to see you all. My name is Christian. I'm a IATSE member and a PA based out of New Mexico. And I've got a short story to illustrate why you should never give up your rights or chainsaw on safety. I don't know what you guys know about Albuquerque, but we have this abandoned rail yards from nearly 100 years ago that they love to film at. They do other stuff there, but it's mostly a filming location. And last year I had one of my first grip jobs at that location. I was a rigging grip. We were setting up a crane to do this really weird shot where the DP would like start off steady camming through a crowd of refugees, and then he would walk up to the trench next to the crane and walk onto a platform on the cranes, like on the end of the crane arm, and then the crane would slowly like push outwards towards the sunset while he was also lifted up. It was a weird, cool motion, but and it was supposed to like watch as the main character drove away. But the part they didn't account for is some bit of the hardware didn't work out, so that platform was supposed to be rested on solid concrete, but instead it was over open air, and it would not have worked out. So instead they put two of the most inexperienced grips, myself and a girl, in that, I want to say chest-high trench to hold up a piece of plyboard for his platform on the crane to rest on. And after he stepped onto the plyboard and onto the platform for them to start the move, we had like 2 seconds to move out of the way for the move to happen without us being in the way of the crane arm. Unfortunately, someone in Video Village didn't like the sound of the plyboard being pulled out of the way, so they said, shut that down, put a blanket under or something. And then our shot with a huge time constraint, so there was no practice, there was no safety. What ended up happening is trying to move that board after the DP stepped off of it before the crane came for us was really hard. It got stuck, and I got a really horrific view of the other grip almost getting her head chopped in half.
Oh my God.
Oh.
Yeah, I looked up as we were struggling with this board, and I just see the crane arm a few inches behind the back of her head, and it would have scissored her right between the wall and the crane arm. And no one even knew about it. They were just worried about getting their golden hour shot. Only one other person saw it. So I know how it is on set, but if there's something scary, you definitely need to speak up.
Yeah. I think for me as an AD, I'd be looking at that like, what? No, this is, I mean, I've been in that situation where like a director and DP are like, I want to do this shot. And I'm like, we're not doing that because it's unsafe. You're about to lose an actor's arm or something like that. Like I've totally shut down shots. I can't even believe the AD team didn't say anything about that. That's insane to me. That is totally insane. There's no way I would have let that happen. There's just no way. Like, I don't care how much pressure is on me from the director. It's like, you are allowed to say no. And sometimes ADs just don't because they're scared.
No, that is a set that I would have immediately walked off on. And I've had situations where I was put into like an unsafe situation, but on the theater side, because I did theater and then I switched over to film. I've had a situation where like a ladder almost came crashing down on everybody because the director was just like, I want this light, and then we have to change the way the light looks. And then so it required some like finagling, and then like people were walking back and forth on on our cables that we were using to like hook up the electricity to the lights. And I'm talking about theater at this point. And like they yanked like the cable, and like I'm on like it's like probably like 8, 9, 10 feet. I don't know. I'm really short, but it was just really tall. I'm on a big ladder on the very top, like almost at the top of the run. And like they yanked it, and then like I almost came crashing down like I'm on the ladder, and I almost came crashing down on the stage, and it's in like, you know, like a little kind of like black box theater. So if I would have fell off the stage. I would have cracked myself on the seats because people were being impatient, and just like like I almost walked off. I was like, yo, y'all cannot do that. Like y'all cannot do that. Like, you cannot mess with somebody's safety on any kind of set.
Yeah.
Like, so that is a set that I would have walked off on, because I almost walked off. I was like, y'all are not paying me enough, and I'm not even union, and y'all wouldn't have paid my hospital bills. Like, I almost walked off. Like the main like technician, she was just like, no, don't do. I'm like, come on, like I literally almost walked off, because like one thing, like it's one thing if you're like, what, you know, we were talking about like horror stories. It's one thing if you're like into it with your peers and everything, like that's one thing, like that's a temper thing, that's an emotional thing. But when it comes to your safety, like I will be so quick to walk off a set if you're playing with somebody's safety, especially if you are not union. That's why like unions are meant to protect you. So if you're taking a job and you're not in any type of union that protects you, you are taking that risk, and you have to.
Not to put too much into the union world, because there's so many things I've seen done on set that are like questionable, and it was an entirely union set, and I'm like, you know, everyone tries to get away with so much. It's ridiculous. Like, I know that unions are there to try and prevent those types of things, and there's a shop steward, and you know, the first AD is supposed to be the safety officer on set, but so many things they just try to get away with. It's just like, dude, nothing is worth your life. I don't give a okay, like there's nothing out there that's like, I'm not gonna die for your, you know, your sunset shot. I'm not gonna. That's fucking crazy. I'm sorry. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Erica is new. Erica, if you have any questions, anyone? Film industry, horror stories, anything? Thanks, Christian, for that horrific friggin' situation. Oh my.
That's a different type of horror.
I know, right? Seriously. But if no one has any questions, I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. We've been doing it for like 2 hours. So, thanks everyone for joining me. Anyone have questions? No? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Maybe the last one for me would be like, would you know the process for someone to be able to work in a set in the States?
So if you're like, if you are not from the US, I've been actually getting this question a lot lately. In the past month, I've gotten this a few times. But if you are on a union set, you have to be authorized to work in the US. So they are going to do an I-9. They're going to verify. So you have to have, permit, green card, or permanent residency to work on union sets, because they're going to check all that stuff. Now, if you're here on like a tourist visa or something, you may fall into some indie stuff where they'll just pay you cash, or they'll pay you a check or something like that. I mean, you're taking a risk, and the production's taking a risk. I mean, if the production doesn't really care about that stuff and they're just paying everyone cash anyways, and they're not really filing taxes and stuff, then you can probably get away with some experience on US sets in the indie world. So, I mean, if you're on a tourist visa, you're not supposed to be working, but I know a lot of people, in student visas as well, you can probably, I know of 2 people, one being from, I think, Brazil, and another one being from, I think, France, where they had permission to work in the States. I forget what visa they had, but it was like, I think, not H1 or something. I think it might have been a business one, but where NBC had an issue with that. And even though they're authorized to work in the US, they didn't want them to work on their production because for whatever reason, they were like, oh, you can't work on our set. So it just depends. Even if you have the permission to work, some studios, some bigger companies won't allow you to work, which is, I think, really weird. Like that problem happened on New Amsterdam, where like the first team runner, she was from Brazil. She worked the whole first season, no problems. And then they, they looked into her, because every season you have to re-verify everything. And they were like, oh, you're on this visa? Nope, sorry, you can't work for NBC. And she ended up working, I think, on like Netflix shows and like CBS and stuff like that. So every company is different. It's weird, but I mean, you can get away with working in the US if you don't have the proper visas, but you're taking a risk. That's all I'm going to say. So it's possible, but. So I guess, is there anything else? I'm going to end it here, guys. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I wish I could thank Darin again. I hope you guys gained something from this. Thank you, Kit, for joining me once again. I love having you on these calls. It always adds like an extra little flair.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm going to end it here, guys. Thank you so much. And hopefully next month. maybe I'll be working by next month. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I hope everyone has a good day.
All right.
then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.